Our focus today is going to be leading reading development. How can educators lead reading development through text and word study instruction? As you remember, the focus of these seminars is to give you sort of a big picture behind the early steps and next steps logistics. We're very pleased and proud about the fact that early and next steps are really hands-on. You learn by doing, working with kids, but at the same time it's important to step back from the nuts and bolts and the logistics and sort of help you understand the big picture behind the kinds of things you actually see happening with the children. Because that background knowledge, that theoretical framework that you develop, is helpful not just for the child you're tutoring today, but for children you tutor or work with or instruct in the future, because it gives you a sense overall of what reading development looks like for children, beginning readers, and how instruction, intervention through text and word study can help pull that development along and make progress happen. So that's our focus for today. Site coordinators, don't forget to complete the following information. This has to be faxed to Nikki Fellows up at the Reading Clinic. And just remember that attendance at all 5 seminars is required. Whether you're going for university credit or not, if you want to be certified in early and next steps, your attendance at these 5 seminars is required. And we need that information about your attendance in order to keep that information for your certification. Okay, so let's think about reading development. How kids who don't know how to read become readers, okay? You used to not be able to say this, pre-readers or non-readers, because the notion a few years ago was that everyone's kind of a reader whether they can read or not. Well, the fact is, if you can't access text, if you can't access print at all, you're not a reader. You are really a non-reader, okay? And so what we're going to do in this session and the next one is we're going to track reading development all the way from I can't read any words all the way up to, say, a strong 3rd grade reader. And as you know, a strong 3rd grade reader can read a lot of stuff. They can certainly cope with a newspaper and myriad other things that you'd find in society. So there's a journey that happens from kids who can't read any words at all the way up to, I'm a pretty strong 3rd grade reader and I can read the newspaper, most words in it, and understand it. Okay, and so in order to know where to start and how to make this development progress, we've got to take a look at where we're going, what the final end goal is, okay? And so what is reading to someone who's at least 3rd grade level and then on up? We could call that, you know, expert reading or accomplished, successful reading. What does it look like? And what does the research tell us about that? Up until about the late 70s, early 80s, there was a lot of speculation about the reading process and how it actually occurred. And there were all kinds of interesting arguments happening amongst the researchers. Some researchers thought reading happened one way, others researchers suspected it happened another way, and there were a lot of empirical investigations going on to try and ascertain exactly how does the reading process happen. When we look at a bunch of print, when we look at text on a page, what happens in the brain and in the mind via the eyes, via all the cognitive systems that we have inside ourselves? And there were lots of really contentious debates about this. But thankfully, the invention of a machine called the eye tracker actually did a lot to help us truly understand physiologically what's happening, and from there, with the eyes, with the brain, and then from there we've been able to make some I think, very strong extrapolations to what is happening in the mind, okay? Right up here you see summarized what researchers would call the interactive model of the reading process, okay? The notion here is that reading's driven both from the bottom up in decoding, text coming through the eyes into the mind, okay? And at the same time, information from the mind, background knowledge that you hold in your mind, interacts with the data you're getting from the text and informs it so that you can understand what you're reading. So you've got bottom-up processes moving through, okay, and then you've got top-down processes moving through your background knowledge, and together they interact for you to construct a model of meaning of what you find in the text. That's the interactive model of the reading process, okay? Boiled down into two big factors, decoding and comprehension. And you notice we've got like a little mathematical formula here with a multiplication sign in the middle. The notion there is it has to be a multiplication sign because, as you know from your math background, that if you've got, if one of the factors falls to 0, then the product falls to 0. So that means both of these processes, decoding and comprehension, are critical for successful reading to occur. And if one of them isn't happening well, you're not going to have successful reading. So let's talk about what they mean. When you talk about decoding, all right, when we talk, and remember we're at this end of the continuum, we're talking about people who can already read quite nicely, okay? They don't have difficulty. We're talking about an expert here. Anybody from a strong third grade reader up has the machinery in place and it's running, okay? When we talk about decoding, for expert readers, we're talking about it being automatic. Okay, automatic means it's accurate, it's fast, and it's effortless. It costs you nothing cognitively. Okay, I think probably you could think of several good analogies to this. Okay, if you play a musical instrument, initially when you're first learning how to play, even a particular piece or learning to play at all, you want to think about actually. When you're first learning an instrument at all, everything is kind of arduous and clunky and it takes work and you have to remember where to put your fingers, okay? Everything requires thought. Another good analogy is if you've ever learned to drive a stick shift on a standard transmission. When you're first learning to do that, you're thinking, okay, clutch in, gas off, stick in first, let off the clutch. Everything requires thought. It's effortful. It's often inaccurate. It's not very fast, and it costs you a lot of mental energy, okay? Now, fast forward those ideas, those metaphors to now, okay? If you're facile at driving a stick, you don't think about putting it into first and what to do with the clutch. You just do it. It doesn't cost you any mental energy. You're doing other things. You're thinking about what you're going to make for dinner. You're thinking about what you've got to do later that day. You're not spending energy on thinking about the transmission. The same with a musical instrument. Once you get good, you're not thinking about where to place your fingers for a note. They go there without costing you anything. Decoding is the same way for expert readers. You're accurate the vast majority of the time. Doesn't mean you never make mistakes, but it doesn't mean you never grind the gears either. I mean, once in a while those clunky things happen. Good decoders are accurate, they're really fast, and it doesn't take any mental energy. That's a beautiful thing because it leaves all that cognitive capacity available for comprehension. What we know from the research is that comprehension for expert readers is both automatic and strategic. The last 15 years or so of comprehension research has really emphasized the strategic nature of the expert reader, and there certainly is an aspect of strategy use to good comprehension. However, the heavy push there has almost neglected another body of research in cognitive psychology that suggests that a good deal of comprehension goes on automatically. You're not telling yourself, if you're reading a novel, you're not telling yourself every 10 seconds, make meaning. You know, I have to be thinking about what you just do it. And oftentimes when you think about when is it you become strategic when you're reading? When you're having trouble. When you're having trouble, you get metacognitive about it. You think, oh, I have no idea what I just read. If you've ever had that experience where you've read a bunch of text and you think, I have no idea what I just read. You kind of wake up and you say, I better go back. That's being strategic. And if you go back and you're still having trouble, you have to be persistent about it. You try different strategies. These are being knowledgeable, knowing what strategies to use, being flexible in which strategies work best when, and being persistent in thinking, I still don't understand. I got to go back and figure it out. That's the strategic nature of comprehension. And it definitely is there, primarily with monitoring and troubleshooting. But recognize that a good deal of comprehension occurs automatically without your conscious monitoring or knowledge. So decoding, comprehension, both have to be there, and in expert reading, both are there, just operating along with decoding, primarily automatic, a lot of comprehension automatic, and sometimes strategic. So this is summarized, what I'm describing here can be summarized nicely by these pie charts, okay? Notice that for the expert reader, if you think about what each pie chart represents, it's your cognitive capacity. It's your ability to think about stuff. How many things this shows you how many things can you think about at one time. And you know cognitive capacity is finite, it's limited. And that's sort of the main constraining factor for us in all mental activity, but certainly in reading, is we can only think of so many things at once. You know, when you're trying to think of too many things, what happens? You forget things, you confuse things, you develop misconceptions because you can't take in all the information at once. If you think about, you know, sometimes when you feel overwhelmed, say at work, you're thinking about 5 different million things at once. You've got a conference with Spike's mother, and she's a pain, and Spike's a pain, and what are you going to say with her? And you know, then you've got to talk to the principal about it afterward, and you're kind of a little bit nervous about that. And you've got to send the lunch orders in for the kid, or the lunch ladies, all the kids or the lunch ladies are going to have a fit. You didn't take anything out of the freezer to defrost for dinner. Somebody has a soccer game later that night. Your husband's blah, 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 blah. Okay, you've got so many things going. Your cognitive capacity gets strained. And you start to have problems with it. That's, you know, when you blow up or whatever. Okay, so it's the same thing with reading. Cognitive capacity for reading is limited, okay? Just like all other mental activities. Now for expert readers, this isn't even a problem, because as you notice, what do expert readers spend most of their cognitive capacity on? Comprehension. Why are they able to do that, okay? Site coordinators, I'd like you to stop the tape for a minute here. And here's the question I'm going to pose to you participants. Why is it that expert readers can devote so much of their cognitive capacity to comprehension? And why is it that novice readers, beginning readers, troubled readers, readers with difficulties, at-risk readers, beginning readers, why is it that beginning readers can only spend a tiny slice of their cognitive capacity on comprehension? Talk about that, speculate with your colleagues an answer to that question, and we'll be back in 1 minute. Okay, so I'm going to speculate that what you were talking about is the fact that expert readers spend so much of their time on comprehension because they don't have to spend time on decoding. Remember that if decoding is automatic, and if it's effortless for you cognitively, you don't have to expend mental energy on it. It just happens. It's like breathing. You don't have to tell yourself, lungs in, lungs out. You don't have to do that. You don't have to think about it. It's the same with decoding. And as a result, expert readers have all that cognitive capacity left over to do the very thing that reading is designed for, which is construct meaning from text. On the flip side, your novice readers. And I would consider novice readers beginners, and any reader who has not achieved what I would call expert status, any reader who is still struggling significantly. The issue here, in other words, we all start out like this. Most of us end up here. Certainly most people in education end up here. But some folks stay here with varying degrees of the pie being shaped like this, for example, but some people stay here their whole lives, and we all start here. The reason beginning readers, struggling readers spend so little time on comprehension is because the vast majority of their cognitive capacity is devoted to decoding, figuring out the pronunciation of the words in front of them. It's not effortless for them. It's extremely effortful. It's also frequently inaccurate, which causes problems, and it's slow as molasses. And so as a result, they burn up or expend all their cognitive energy figuring out what the words are, and they've got very little left over to think carefully about the text. So the task is, for us educators, is to help beginning, and particularly say for early steps, the notion is these kids that we get in early steps are at risk of staying here, okay? In next steps, they're stuck here. And so the task for us is to help move them from this kind of a schematic up to here, where they're devoting far less of of their mental resources to decoding and more to comprehension. So let's talk about, so if that's the challenge, if that's the task, moving beginning or novice readers or struggling readers away from that decoding consumed stance toward text, toward a stance of, I can read the words. I might not have the background knowledge all the time for understanding the text, but think about it. Which would you rather have? A child who can't decode and lacks background knowledge, or a child who can decode but lacks background knowledge? I mean, it's an easy choice. So we can at least get them there and get the decoding up to speed, and then at the same time work on building background knowledge and vocabulary. So how do we do that? Instruction and intervention. So what do we know about from research about what constitutes effective instruction and effective intervention? Well, here's the biggies right now, and they're summarized in a variety of research syntheses. You can look at the National Reading Panel that came out in 2000. You can look at Preventing Reading Difficulties in Young Children, which came out in 1998. You can look at Adams in 90. You can look at, there are just, at this point now, a plethora of documents, research syntheses that suggest that the following components, phonological awareness, word recognition, and that means focusing on high frequency and decoding strategies, so high frequency words and decoding strategies, also known as phonics, comprehension, both reading and listening, print appreciation, in other words, developing an appreciation for the different kinds of text out there, different genre, narrative, expository, print awareness, knowing how books work, oral language development, which is the absolute, I always think of it as if you think about an iceberg and you see the tip of the iceberg on above the water line. I think of that as being decoding. You can see it, you can feel it, you can mess with it, you can try to avoid it if you're in a ship, okay? But what you're not seeing underneath is this giant, much bigger danger particularly for at-risk kids, and that is oral language development, having the vocabulary and the background knowledge to bring to bear on the text, because without that, if you think about why we have the 4th grade dip in scores, etc., that's because the tests are finally asking for that kind of knowledge. And many kids, particularly from high poverty environments or kids who are struggling learning English as a second language, this will come back to bite them every time. So it needs to be paid attention to, no question about it. And process writing is another important component of effective instruction. Okay, so our focus today is going to be how do we get kids successful at accessing the print, at accessing the text, okay? Central to that is recognizing the words. You can't get around it. Reading is visually driven. It requires that you access the text, so how do we help kids access the text? So for a long time, this question has been a huge, contentious debate in the reading field. Some folks say, for a long time, it's not really important. Not that big a deal. Just immerse kids in literacy and everything's fine. We know now that that view is wrong, actually. And we know that for most beginning readers, word recognition instruction is critical. Now, for the kids that walk into your classroom in 1st grade reading Harry Potter, they've already completed this process. Remember we talked about reading development being a journey from I can't read any words up to I can read the newspaper pretty darn well. Okay, there's that journey. Okay, the kids that walk in already reading, they're already halfway through with the journey or perhaps already done. Okay, I'm talking about kids who walk in the door in the beginning of 1st grade who know their letters and maybe can read their name and a word like mom or love or something like that, but no more. Okay, for most of those kids, word recognition instruction is critical. Learning to break the code, to be able to look at a word, say for example like, and to be able to look at that, access it, and know what it is to come up with the accurate pronunciation is hard. It's not a natural process. And for some people it's harder than others. Some kids only need to look at a word like cup and go k up, cup 2 or 3 times and they own it. Immediately it's amalgamated in memory, they've got it. For other kids, they need to look at it 20, 30 times before they've got it. For other kids, they need 300 repetitions before they've got it. So there's variability amongst individual children in terms of how quickly they learn to what we call break the code. Okay? For many kids, it's quite a struggle. Now, what we do also know from research is that lack of success in breaking the code can often lead to what's called a negative spiral of downward achievement. Because if you think about it, the kids in, well, think about your typical first grade classroom. The kids who do well, who are successful initially at learning how to read. They walked in the door in first grade in the beginning, didn't know how to read, but it happens smoothly for them. It happens easily. They get excited about it. So what do they do when they go home? When they go home at night, what do? They read, exactly. And so because they read, they get better at it. So because they get better at it, they get even more excited about it, so they read more. And these are the kids that you'll find reading everything they can get their hands on. Okay? And so those kids are involved in a positive upward spiral. Not surprisingly, as the years go on, these kids' IQ is impacted by the amount of reading they do because they start learning from what they read. They start reading all kinds of stuff. Okay? Now take the flip side of that coin. The child who comes in, maybe even knows a lot of their letters. Let's just say they start out in the same place as those other children we just talked about. Not reading, but they know their letters, know their sounds. But for whom breaking the code, okay, figuring out that k, says cup is really hard, okay? It takes them a million times. They get tired of it. They get frustrated. They might not see the value of it. They have a negative experience with it. So what do these kids do when they go home? Do they read? They play Nintendo. They do anything but read, right? Okay? So as a result, they don't make progress as quickly. If you don't practice these skills, they don't get any easier. They avoid it. They don't practice it. So it's hard for them. It continues to be hard. Because it continues to be hard, they don't want to do it. So you get all kinds of avoidance and denial behaviors going. Stanovich called it a negative spiral where eventually, you know, kids who don't read, who really don't pick up books, you get by 5th and 6th grade, it's impacting their intellect, their knowledge base about the world because they're not learning the kinds of things you have to learn basically through text. You can't get all the learning we have to have in this society today through conversation and TV. You just can't do it. Some of it has to come through text, and if you're not reading, you're not getting it. So Stanovich called it a negative spiral. He called the phenomenon that I'm just describing to you, the positive spiral for successful kids and the negative spiral for kids who are not successful, the Matthew effect. And if you think about the passage from the Bible where it talks about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, that's what he describes in reading, where kids who start out with, you know, fairly similar or small discrepancies. You know, the kids who do well take off with an upward trajectory like this. The kids who don't do well, they don't regress. You can't regress. And they don't maybe flatline. But over time, the gap between these two groups widens significantly and gets bigger and bigger over time, primarily because of this lack of practice, lack of text consumption effect. Okay, so how do we stop that discrepancy from happening? One of the key factors in that is helping the kids who struggle with breaking the code break it, okay? Because that's really the trigger mechanism for, I think, for the positive or the negative trajectory, okay? So how do you make that happen? Word recognition instruction has to be high quality and intensive for these kids, okay? And in the beginning, for beginning readers, it's not a question of balancing the curriculum, okay? The term balanced literacy has, well, it's almost out of vogue now, actually, which I'm glad about. But the term balanced literacy really held sway here in the last 10 years. And I think it's a politically charged term. It's a rhetorical term that actually, I think, frankly, is useless. Because, I mean, who wants to say they do unbalanced literacy curriculum? No one's going to say, I'm a champion of, I actually, you know, advocate unbalanced curriculum. Everyone thinks they're balanced. Ken Goodman thinks he's balanced. Reed Lyon thinks he's balanced. You know, you get the most hardcore phonics expert is going to say they're balanced, and the most hardcore whole language person is going to say they're balanced. So it's really kind of a useless term. because what people have taken it to mean is balance means equal time. I have to spend half my time on phonics, and I have to spend half my time in curriculum. And that's, it's just, it's bad thinking, because what curriculum needs to look at where the child is in terms of development. What does that child need at this time, and not be searching for some kind of weird political balance. For beginning readers, word recognition instruction is going to take a lot of time, and it should. The point is to give kids what they need at different points in development. Okay. So, for beginners, word rec needs to be a big part of the curriculum. That means other components are going to get less initially. That's okay, because if once they can access the text, as automaticity with words increases, other components are going to get more. Word recognition instruction requires careful crafting. That means preparation and practice. For many of us who developed or accumulated our teacher certifications, say after 1977, and even now, frankly, this is a difficult area, because teacher preparation classes typically don't spend much time here. You have folks coming out, new teachers coming out who aren't prepared, have never taught this, have never really had any experience teaching it, depending on where they're student teaching, may have never done it. And if you're thrust into a first grade classroom, you better hope you have a nice scope and sequence for phonics and some suggestions for how to do the activities, because otherwise you're completely on your own. And whereas certain other aspects of the literacy curriculum can be a little less crafted and a little less developed, for example, comprehension discussions about a text, if your class gets into it and you're discussing things, and a beautiful discussion can happen based on responding to what the kids say, you can't do that with phonics instruction. Unless you know exactly where you're going with a particular concept and how you want, for example, if I said to you, sound, and everyone said, okay, or if I just said, okay, boys and girls, now tell me the name of the sound this letter makes. No, not the letter name, the sound. What sound does it make? What sound does it make? Now let's go to this one here. Now what sound, do you see how inept that is and how clunky and too much verbiage? You've got to have very clear, clean prompts so that initially it could look something like this. Sound, sound, blend, sound, blend. So over time, I don't even have to say anything to you. It would just go like this. Or just, okay? Do you see how much cleaner that is? But it requires forethought. You can't just get out. Plus, you wouldn't want to do it a different way every day. The kids don't know what you expect. So my point is, you can't wing this kind of stuff. Word recognition instruction requires careful thought, preparation, and practice. If you try to wing it, it's going to be slipshod. And the bottom line for that is, when it's slipshod, at-risk kids suffer. Because for those kids, for at-risk kids, this is the most critical, fragile, fraught with peril part of the curriculum. All right, so let's talk about the nature of the reading process more. Let's dive deeply into this whole decoding issue and how it happens and how learning to read happens, et cetera, et cetera. For a long time, the educational community, particularly the reading community, has been divided along these issues. And so, thankfully, now that we have a good amount of research on this, we can actually go to the empirical research and say, what does the empirical research suggest? And we can get some very definitive answers if we go to the research. So one of the misconceptions that's been around for a long time, frankly, that I want to help lay to its final rest by pounding another nail into the coffin lid, hopefully, is the notion that learning to read is natural, okay? Just like learning to speak. We don't immerse babies. I mean, we don't instruct babies how to speak. We don't say, you don't take a 9-month-old and say, okay, Matt, say, I want a cookie, and repeat. Okay, we don't do that to babies. We just speak to them. We immerse them in speech, and so they learn to speak. So therefore, we should do the same thing with reading. If we just immersed young children in meaningful, literacy-rich activities, reading and writing, and we just immerse them rather than instructing, they'll do a lot better. This was one of the central tenets of the whole language philosophy. And it's held sway and still holds sway in some communities. But the fact of the matter is, it's wrong, okay? It's just wrong, and I'd like to tell you why, okay? The rebuttal to this argument comes down to a basic physiology, okay? Speech is hardwired into our cognitive systems, okay? It is part of us. If you are physiologically and psychologically, cognitively intact, and you are exposed to the mother and father tongue, you will learn to speak. Absolutely. That's because it's been so much a part of us for so long, okay? Reading and writing, on the other hand, are cultural inventions. Depending on your view of evolution, regardless of what your view of evolution is, reading and writing have only been around for a much shorter time than learning to speak. In other words, learning to speak is part of us, it's hardwired in. Reading and writing are not hardwired in. They require instruction to learn. You can't just immerse people in reading and writing and they automatically learn. Plenty of people who learn to speak don't learn to read and write, even with instruction. There are societies, fewer now, but up until, you know, a couple hundred years ago, there were societies where people certainly spoke that had no literacy, no written literacy. It's not part of the cognitive system yet. It may be at some point, but certainly it isn't now. It's not natural. It's a cultural invention. Speech is natural when you're immersed. It happens. Reading is not natural. It is a cultural invention, okay? For at-risk children, it especially requires instruction. We know for a fact that for at-risk children, unless they receive instruction, and sometimes for those kids who really struggle, intensive intervention, they will not learn to read. The other point is, when you look at the last 30 to 35 years of research on reading, over and over, the major research syntheses show that the most effective reading programs, the most effective reading approaches are those that combine explicit, systematic / direct phonics instruction with a focus on meaning, comprehension of the stories, over and over again. So, just to go back to that, learning to read is not natural, okay? You can't model learning to read on learning to speak because they're two entirely different cognitive acts. Okay, so remember we were just talking about at-risk kids. Kids for whom the notion that we just immerse them is particularly dangerous, okay? Those would be kids from low socioeconomic backgrounds, kids from poverty. They definitely are at risk. Kids who are English language learners, kids who have cognitive limitations. For example, the child that has short-term memory issues can't retain, their short-term memory degrades very fast. For example, let's try this one again. Ready? Sound these out for me. For kids who have short-term memory issues, they've already forgotten what that first sound was. So when they try to blend, they're caught almost unawares because they're thinking, and they'll say something like pup or pan, or they'll say something that starts with P because that's all they can remember is that P sound, okay? Kids who have those kind of cognitive limitations, definitely at risk for reading difficulty. Kids with hearing impairments, for example, the kid who has had tons and tons of ear infections at a young age, where everything sounded like it was in water and perhaps they didn't develop speech as well, or kids who have ongoing hearing impairments, definitely at risk. We know, for example, that deaf children as a whole, as a group, on average, do not go beyond, well, no, not on average. Deaf children, I'm trying to think of how to say this right statistically. It's rare for many deaf children to go beyond 10th grade in reading ability. 9th, 10th grade is where the best deaf kids tend to peak out. Because, if you think about it, there's a phonological aspect, a sound aspect to learning to read. Phonological recoding is a big piece there, and if you're deaf, you don't have, you don't have as good an access to that. They've actually done some research where they found that they can feel their vocal cords do things even when they're deaf. There's some fascinating research on it, but hearing impairments definitely get in the way of learning to read. Kids who have delays in language development, no question, are at risk for reading difficulties. And for kids who have limited experiences with literacy, kids who come to first grade, say, don't know their alphabet, don't really know how books work, they're starting out behind the 8 ball. So any of these factors here, and I'm sure you're seeing these kids in your schools, any of these factors here are likely to put children at risk for reading difficulties. And again, the big at-risk piece for them tends to be breaking the code, getting access to the text early, successfully, so that it goes well, so that they enjoy it, so they get caught up in a positive spiral. Okay, that becomes the real Gordian knot or Achilles heel, depending on which Greek myth you want to think about. Here's another misconception, one of my favorites. Good readers just sample the print, and they predict the identity of words from context. Now, I bolded this for good reason. They predict the identity of words from context. I'm not talking about meaning. I'm talking about the identity of the word. Okay, so keep that in mind before you have heart failure there. Okay? Wrong. Okay? This, for many years, was actually, this is called the top-down model of the reading process. For many years held sway. Many researchers considered it probably likely to be true. It was a hypothesis, okay? They were suggesting that this was what happened in the reading process. And many researchers thought that this had, you know, if you were a betting person, you'd have put your money on this in 1971. The notion was, we read so quickly, there's no way we can be looking at all those words. When you think about the average adult reads somewhere around, an expert reading adult reads somewhere around 190, 200 words a minute, silently, okay? And higher. Their thinking was, we read so fast, there's no way we're looking at all that text. We must be skipping stuff. And perhaps using our background knowledge, we sample the text, we look at a few letters, and then we use our background knowledge to fill in what the words are. They called it the psycholinguistic guessing game, or predicting text, okay? And this was promulgated by a couple of I hesitate to say researchers, because I don't consider them researchers, but let's say a couple of folks by the names of Ken Goodman and Frank Smith. They promulgated this hypothesis. Frank Smith has written a book called Understanding Reading, and I think it's got to be its 13th edition. Still basically saying the same thing, and with some faint grasps at empirical research in it, but it's not been updated at all, because what happened was folks were so interested in investigating this question. How does the mind, how do we read? How do the eyes and the mind work together? That when I mentioned the eye tracker, when that machine was invented, folks did all kinds of experiments with it, as well as with other kinds of technological advances to figure out exactly what the eyes did. And what they found, in fact, was that this hypothesis is completely wrong. It's the opposite, in fact, is true, okay? What the research with the eye tracker and other various types of experimental conditions, the data from those studies suggests that actually good readers visually and cognitively take in almost every word on the page, okay? They recognize most words automatically at sight. And when they do encounter an unfamiliar word, they use their knowledge of other words and spelling patterns to quickly chunk the word and generate a pronunciation. Okay? And interestingly enough, it's actually poor readers who rely on context. You can take this one to the bank. There have been dozens and dozens of studies that show that this is actually the case, and that good readers do not sample and skip through the text and predict. It's just that we're so fast, we're so automatic, we don't need to use context. Using context to identify the pronunciation or the identity of the word, remember I'm not talking about meaning, okay? Using context to identify the pronunciation, the identity of the word is actually slow and unreliable. And I'm going to show you some of the actual text they used in some of the experiments to come up with this finding. Okay? So, here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to ask you to read this silently. Oh, let me give you actually a little background first. This is a text, and I think it's roughly 10 to 15% of the text is X'd out. So you've got access to like 85% of the text, so no whining. Okay? You've got 85% of it here. What I'd like you to do is read this silently and then pretend you're going to take a test on it afterward. Site coordinators, you might want to just leave this up here and anybody figure out what text this is? Every once in a while somebody gets it. It's Jack London's Call of the Wild, talking about Curly and Buck, when Curly and Buck have their first big fight. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is turn to a colleague and discuss with your colleague, what was it like reading this text and why? Site coordinators, let's pause right here for just a few minutes. We're back. I was just asking you to talk amongst yourselves about what it was like reading this text. And from discussion that we've heard about from participants, people typically say things like this. I had to go really slow. I kept having to go back because I kept trying things out where the X's were, and then I had to go make sure that they fit and they made sense. So I had to go really slow. Other people talk about how it really inhibits their motivation to keep reading, how they wanted to quit after a while because it was just so annoying. Other people talked about how they started skipping ahead to try and find other things, but in every case, folks say this was not a pleasant experience. Okay? It's not your usual type of reading experience, nor would they want to take a test on this necessarily. Okay? You've got to remember, you're only missing 10 to 15% of the text. You've got 85% of it. What you need to think about now is this is exactly what it's like when you have to use context all the time, frequently, not all the time, when you have to use context frequently to identify words, their identity and the pronunciation. This is exactly what it's like. So this is exactly what it's like to be a poor reader. And not a very poor reader. Remember, you've got 85% of the text. There are plenty of kids for whom it's a lot harder than this. Okay? This is not what expert readers experience. This is what poor readers experience when they rely on context. Okay? So just keep that memory in mind, and let's try another little experiment here. Okay. So let's find out what, rather than using context, let's find out what good readers do when they come to words they don't know, for example. All right, so let's read this out loud together. Ready? When I walked into the hall of mirrors, I saw phantasmagoria happen with my own body. Now, turn to somebody near you and speculate with a colleague. All of you came up with phantasmagoria or something darn close. And I'm guessing you haven't heard that word before or experienced it very often, if you have. How did you figure out the pronunciation of that word, and what does that word mean? So 2 questions. How did you figure out the pronunciation of that word? What does that word mean? Site coordinators, pause the tape, please. Let's try one more before we go back to that question. Let's read this next one. Okay? Let's read it together. Ready? Kathleen, my husband said, no one would ever accuse you of being grandiloquent. Okay. So, same question. How did you get the pronunciation of grandiloquent? I'm guessing that not many of you had that word grandiloquent in your background knowledge. I didn't even have it till I looked it up one day. I was looking for hard words in the dictionary for this particular slide, and I came up with that one, and I thought, grandiloquent. I'm not. So, how did you come up with the pronunciation, grandiloquent? What does grandiloquent probably mean? Site coordinators, pause the tape one more time. And we're back. Here's what I'm expecting you probably talked about with your colleagues. Most people, when they came to those difficult words, generated a pronunciation by very quickly chunking together pieces of the word. Fan, Taz, and maybe Magoria. Bre, vil, or brev. You know, the variety of places you can break these words up. But brev, il, o, quent. Chunked it together and came up with a pronunciation that, if not dead on, was darn close. Okay? So that's what good readers do. Good readers very quickly take chunks when they come to a word they don't know. Okay? Remember that the rest of the words there, you weren't working hard with those. You just read them automatically. But when you did come to a word you didn't know, what you did is you very quickly chunked the patterns that you know to come up with a pronunciation that, if not dead on, was darn close. Okay? You didn't use context to do that. You didn't use context to get the chunks. You used your memory, you know, your representations in memory for those patterns. But what you did use context for was what? To get the meaning. That's where you needed to get the meaning. So what's phantasmagoria mean? Some kind of body transformation, a spectral transformation. You get that from phantom, the whole idea about hall of mirrors. Okay, so distortion of the body in some ways. Breviloquent, the word brevity, meaning brief. Quent, related to speech. Knowing me, I'm not. Okay, all those contextual processes you went through were dedicated toward figuring out the meaning. Good readers use context to figure out the meaning of words, but they don't use context to identify, to get the pronunciation. They do that from their decoding skills, from their patterns, spelling patterns, and words that are already in memory. So, when you're discussing the use of context, try this with your colleagues, because I bet you were sitting here 15 minutes ago saying, I do too use context. I use context all the time. People always, you know, because what we need to do is we need to split these issues, okay? The issues are, what do good readers do to identify the word, meaning come up with a pronunciation, and what do good readers do to figure out the meaning of the word? They are two separate issues. And when it comes to, you know, the identity, the pronunciation, we do not use context. That would be like the Call of the Wild passage. It's clunky. It's unreliable. In fact, the research suggests that even a study by Goff, Griffith, and Jewell, I think, suggests that even when expert readers try to use context, in that kind of situation, the Call of the Wild passage, they're correct about the word only 25% of the time. Those are not good odds. Okay, so even good readers, if we use context, you're going to be wrong 75% of the time, on average. Okay. You want to really see what automaticity is like. This is a lovely little experiment. It's called the Stroop Effect. And this is going to give you a true sense of what automatic word recognition feels like and what it feels like when you try to turn it off. Okay, so site coordinators, what I need you to do is find someone in the audience who has a stopwatch, not a stopwatch, but a second hand on their watch. And that person is going to need to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when that person says go in the audience, I want the rest of the participants to first read the words just as fast as they can. Okay, so again, let me go through that so that you can pause the tape. You need somebody in the audience with a second hand. That person is going to watch till it gets to a good tracking place. Then they're going to say 1, 2, 3, go. All the rest of you participants are going to read this list, starting here to here to here. Read it as fast as you can, and that the timer is going to, when they're done, tell us what time it is, how long it took them. Okay, so pause the tape and try that. All right, so welcome back. I'm guessing that you probably read that list of words quite easily, and you were probably somewhere around 7 to 10 seconds in the time it took you to read those, okay? Easy task. Now, another easy task. You all know your primary colors, I'm assuming. So your next task is going to be, instead of reading the word, when the timer says go, your task is to tell us the color of each word. So for example, you're going to say red, blue, green. So don't read the word, tell us the color ink that the word is written in. Same kind of thing, timer, you're going to say 1, 2, 3, go. See how long it takes you to read all of the words, and then the time at the end. So coordinators, pause this frame, and hopefully we'll have sent you if you can't read it very well off here, we'll have sent you a page or an overhead that you can use. Okay, welcome back. Well, wasn't that interesting? I think some of you folks probably need some remedial work in your primary colors because I think that was a little slower. On average, it takes people to read this page somewhere around 18 to 23 seconds. And those of you who took 25 seconds, don't worry, it's okay. Now what I want you to do is we're going to pause here for just a second, and I want you to speculate with your colleagues. Why were the two tasks so different? What was so difficult about this? What made this task of naming the color so difficult? So coordinators, please freeze the tape again. Welcome back again. I'm sure that many of you targeted what the issue is here. Reading the words got in the way of saying the color. You found yourself wanting to say what the words said, then realizing, no, that's not the color, and having to like manually override your automatic word recognition mechanism. Okay? That gives you a sense of what automaticity is really about. Automaticity means you don't have very good control. Well, you don't have control over it. Because what you did is you read the word silently and then had to, say what the color was afterward. You couldn't stop yourself reading the word. And it slowed you down from naming the color, which is a different task. That gives you a sense of what automatic word recognition is truly like. You can't turn it off even when you want to. And that's a beautiful thing when you're reading, but it's tough when you're trying to name the colors. So, okay. So let's go back to this notion here, this misconception, and why it's wrong. Okay? Good readers don't sample the print. You know why? We don't have to. What you just saw with the Stroop Effect, we can take in whole words at a glance. Boom, and we've got it, and we've got we see the spelling clearly, we hear the pronunciation of the word mentally, we get the meanings activated all at the same time. It's called parallel distributed processing. All those things happen in parallel, okay, all at the same time. So we don't predict the identity of words from context. In fact, we recognize the vast majority of what we see automatically. So what does that mean for folks at this end of the journey, folks who can already read? And what does it mean for what we want these kids who are at various stages along this journey, what does it mean we want them to be able to do in terms of word recognition, okay? Well, we want them to do what good readers do, what we know from research that expert readers do. And that is, expert readers identify most of the words automatically at sight. And so we want young readers to develop an increasing number of words, to have an increasing number of words that they can develop, that they can read automatically at sight. When they come to words they don't know, that are unfamiliar to them, we want them to do the same kinds of things we did when faced with the words phantasmagoria and breviloquent. We want them to look for chunks in there that they know from other words and quickly generate a pronunciation that's, if not dead on correct, darn close, okay? And then check to see if the word they generated makes sense and adjust it if necessary. You'll see this, for example, when, say, a late first grade reader might look at the word mountain, okay? Okay. They're reading along something like, and so little bear climbed the, and they come to this and they say, mountain, mountain, mountain. They chunk, mound. They've seen this AI, and so they think it's going to be your typical vowel digraph AI, so they'll say tain, But then when they say mountain, they're close, right? They're closer than if they tried to blend it letter by letter, or if they tried to go, what makes sense in that place? Okay, so they're darn close with mountain, but they realize, oh, that doesn't sound like a word I know. Oh, climbed up the mountain, and then they adjust. That's what we want kids to do, because that's what expert readers do, and that's what research suggests expert readers do. So our challenge becomes, how do we take kids who are here and who are don't come in with a lot of literacy experiences and perhaps not as much motivation to learn these things, how do we very quickly and effectively help them learn to break the code so they can access the print successfully and then get enmeshed in one of those positive upward spirals instead of one of the negative ones. Be here all week. See you next time.